In 1984, there lived an old widowed lady by herself in a 2-story house who was completely immobile and bound to her wheelchair. Ever since the mysterious death of her husband, she required the aid of a caregiver who would visit her daily to help her with everyday tasks. What made it even more difficult was the fact that the 2 floors of the house were only connected by an old staircase inside. When the old lady needed to move between the 2, the caregiver would have to carry her frail body like an infant, up and down the stairs. One day, the police received a call from the widow. There had been a murder. Since police units were scarce at the time, and the murderer had already fled the scene, only one detective was sent out to conduct the initial crime scene report. He arrived to see the caregiver's body splayed out on the floor, with her vocal cords ripped out in a pool of blood on the first level of the house, with the old lady atop the staircase in her wheelchair, watching him, still and silently, seemingly in shock. He could immediately rule her out as a suspect due to her inability to move up and down the stairs, and because she was trapped up there the time the murder took place. The detective put on gloves, took photos, swabbed for evidence, and covered the body until the coroner arrived later. All routine business. He scoped the house downstairs for any clues, then asked the old lady if he could look upstairs. She insisted that she was upstairs the whole time, and no one apart from her had been up there that day. But regardless of this, the detective ascended the staircase, to which she hesitantly moved aside. Beyond the staircase there was a narrow corridor with 3 closed doors along it. He checked behind each of the doors. The empty bedroom, nothing. The bathroom, nothing. He became anxious as he slowly made his way to the final bedroom where the old lady slept. He opened it, and everything looked normal. A bed, a wardrobe, and a bedside table with a lamp. He checked every wall of the room in horror, as it was not what he discovered, but it was what he didn't discover that made him stop dead in his tracks and slowly reach for his gun in its holster. It was a detail so minor that they had completely overlooked it on the last investigation of the husband's death. There was no phone upstairs. He suddenly heard a noise as he withdrew his gun and rushed out of the room, only to find an empty wheelchair atop the stairs.
If you spend enough nights camping, eventually some weird things will happen. A couple of years ago, 2 buddies and I did a month-plus long trip around the US. We would camp in US Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management areas, and were driving my pickup truck. We would get back in some fairly deep wilderness on forest roads. After about 15 nights on our trip, we ended up in some BLM land near Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park in Colorado. It was our very last night in Colorado, and we were exhausted from doing a 14er earlier that morning. We found the coordinates of the campsite online and arrived to the edge of the pavement at about 6 p.m. or so. Ahead of us was a dusty 2-track lane that snaked down through some scraggy trees and bush and made its way to the top of a hill that had views of snow-capped peaks. We hadn't passed a car in a very long time as we drove out there. Our truck made it to the site easily enough, but none of us got out yet. We sat inside and took a bit of a look around. There was a fire pit, lots of trees, but also an abandoned couch and other signs of human waste. Not exactly great vibes. Still though, it was getting pretty late, and we weren't keen on driving even more in the dark. We hopped out and started walking around, cautiously approaching some garbage bags wrapped up in duct tape. I remember joking that this seemed like a place where we would find a body or something to my friends. They all agreed. It was a very eerie atmosphere. We noticed a trail that seemed to go in a circle around the top of the hill, so we decided to check that out before we committed to staying the night. We found some more trash, human waste, but nothing that made us feel like we needed to leave. We decided to cowboy camp, aka sleep on a tarp beneath the stars, and got a nice fire going. We finished off a case of beer, but even with the inebriation, we were suddenly feeling very uneasy. Every couple of minutes or so, one of us would shine a light off into the woods thinking we'd just heard something. Even though this was our 20th consecutive night sleeping outside, something just didn't feel right. Still though, it was really late now, so we started getting ready for bed. After all, we were all carrying bear spray and headlamps, so what was the worst that could happen? I stepped out into the woods to pee and walked about 15 feet without turning on my light. As I'm standing there peeing, I decide I should turn on my headlamp since the fire had messed up my night vision. When I see what the beam of light illuminates, my knees nearly buckled. My jaw was dropped. I stood there in silence for 10 seconds before calling out to my friends. "Hey guys, do you see this?" As I shone my beam around the area, I could see tons of bleached bones all wrapped in barbed wire, hanging from branches directly above the trail we had just walked in daylight. Certainly, we would have noticed those before. They had to have been hung once it got dark, while we sat only 25 feet away. Well, as we observed this field of bones, the consensus among us was, well, fuck that. We snapped a couple of photos of it before throwing our things in the truck and driving away. We drove a ways up the road to the National Park campground. I had never felt so safe to pay $25 to have neighbors nearby. My hypothesis is that it might have been a rancher or something with a grazing lease putting up the bones to scare off scum that leave their trash at the campsites. They were probably just cow bones, but needless to say, it definitely scared the hell out of me. I recently received a friend request that reminded me of this story. This happened after I went to university, so I was about 18 years old at the time. I had made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus, and ended up with a few groups to hang out with, including a new girlfriend and plenty of people from my classes that I liked well enough. There was one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs or threes. I wasn't very discerning about who I'd go with because I got along fine with most people from the class, and we were all sort of trying to make an effort to be social at that age. This meant that when one particular girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to go eat lunch together after that class, I didn't have any reason to refuse. We talked about school and mostly pretty casual stuff, nothing really noteworthy. She did ask me to get lunch with her again the next week though. Soon it became a pattern and there wasn't exactly a way to start saying no suddenly. It was fine with me, but it did mean I lost the chance to eat lunch with anyone else on those days, which sort of hindered my social life a little. In hindsight, I suppose that was the point though. One day in class, I asked someone if I could add them on social media, and this just happened to occur in front of Lily. Immediately, I saw her face jerk towards me from a couple seats over. It was such a sharp reaction that it was hard to ignore. I still remember it even to this day. Needless to say, by the time I had gotten home later, Lily had already sent me a friend request. We had no friends in common either. I don't even know how she knew my last name. I was a bit surprised, but I guess maybe she dug through the university's social media pages and found me through there or something. I did get a bad feeling, but surely this was fine. She ended up messaging me quite a lot and commenting on anything I posted. I told myself she was just awkward. We became friends, if not close, and I'd known worse people. She still always got me to go eat lunch with her after our shared class. Other than that, though, we very rarely had any time together in person. I would see her around sometimes, but I never went out of my way to hang out with her, you know? This meant it was mostly online messaging and seeing each other in group settings. Coincidentally, my girlfriend was also called Lily. This was something that clearly bothered the other Lily. She occasionally hinted that she wanted my girlfriend to pick a different name, or joked about it not suiting her. Clearly, she did not like my girlfriend at all, and I had an idea as to why. It was getting hard to ignore by this point. Lily was starting to unsubtly hint that she had a crush on me. I tried my best not to address it. I mean, what was I gonna say? I'd never known what to do when a friend tried to make a pass at me. I was also not interested in the very least. Even ignoring some of the weird stuff she did, Lily was just not my type. She tended to act and dress in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and all those adults still obsessed with Disney princesses, if you can picture that combination. Things took an uncomfortable turn on the day of our last shared class of the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like she usually did, she asked if I'd go out for a walk with her. Again, I didn't know how to refuse, so I said a small one would be fine. Our campus was bordered by a large patch of woodland. Lily led me out into the woods, and the sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat down on a log and I joined her. She started talking about how much she was going to miss me over the summer. I tried placating her, but I really didn't want to be there, especially because she seemed to be on the verge of tears. I tried to make an excuse about having plans with my girlfriend, but before I could say anything, Lily chose to lean in and kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. I got out of there and was happy to think I would not see her for a while. I came back to university after summer, moving into a house with my friends. Without going off topic, there were some serious issues in that group. Lots of petty arguing and even worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that school year as well. Basically, the whole mess made me recontextualize things with Lily. It didn't seem quite so bad after all that drama. That said, I still didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly just talked online. She was still constantly messaging me every day after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Lily was not pleased to hear that news. I think she hoped to kinda sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend, but as I said before, that was never going to happen. This is where the story gets bad. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talked about my life and mostly just reblogged photos and things I found interesting. I was on there one day when something odd happened. One of the blogs I followed had received an ask with some phrases I recognized. It took a second to register that it was taken from my About page. That made me freeze. I read the message properly. Someone was asking this completely random person to analyze a section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write it. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in a book or something. The important thing, though, was that the question had not been anonymous. It linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know who had taken such a bizarre interest in me in particular. As far as I knew, not a single person in real life knew about my page. It's not like I shared it around or anything. No prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was disturbing. It was almost like a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognized Lily all over that thing. It was this cutesy pink and red page. There were a few posts about her interest, but most of the content was focused on her primary interest, me. Most of the posts were all about me. There were accounts of things I'd done recently, places I'd been, groups I participated in, going to the nightclub recently, as well as references to things as far back as I'd known her. It was clear she'd been keeping tabs on me, both online and offline, gathering every scrap of information she could about my life, and hoarding it in this little collection. She talked about us eating lunch together, how special our dates had been to her, as if it was anything more than acquaintances just getting food after class. She even talked about the time she had forcibly kissed me in the woods. She quoted lyrics from all of my favorite songs, even though I'd never talked about them, and talked about how she'd always be there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me just the way he is as well, which answered another mystery about some anonymous love letters I'd been receiving earlier that year with the same wording. It got worse. There were a lot of posts about my boyfriend as well. Those were not so nice. It was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think of the sort of person who could write so obsessively being fixated on me. One thing that didn't make sense at first was that the blog had also made plenty of references to this best friend, Steven. She had never mentioned this person to me, and I'd never seen anyone else around her either. Her post talked a lot about Steven and how great a friend he was, how much fun they had together, how much he looked out for her. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend or something, when one specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo and captioned it, "Steven sent this to me. He knew I would like it." The problem was, it was a photo taken straight from my page. I had not sent that to her. She took it from my page and then claimed I was her fictional best friend because in her head she'd split me into two people, the two most important people in her life. In her messed up fantasies, I was both her perfect best friend and her soulmate who was going to end up with her. Who was she complaining to? Oh, she had an audience all right. People who took what she said at face value. I saw a bunch of random people agreeing with this stalker, things like my boyfriend didn't deserve me, we were bound to break up soon, I would be with Lily, the person I was clearly destined to be with. She had this fake fanfiction version of my life up for anyone to share their opinion on, and she made herself out to be the hero of it all, of course. I had only gone maybe a month back into this page's history, and I didn't look at everything that was there. It was too much, and I didn't want to see if there was anything from before I'd known her. Needless to say, I sent Lily a message confronting her about this blog. She said nothing. I can't stress how weird it was to have found pages and pages dedicated to me. Then she just acted like it never happened. She said nothing. Didn't even address it, just changed the subject like I'd never even said it, like she hadn't even registered that it existed. I've never seen deflection quite like it. Well, of course, afterward she deleted the page, or at least changed the name and hid it because I could never find it again. That was not the end though. I was not going to hang out with her anymore, but we were still shoved together in classes. She had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person already, so knowing someone was obsessively keeping track of me for who knows how long really scared me a lot. The next thing she pulled was trying to seduce my boyfriend. That was a useless attempt. What was her plan there? Did she hope to tell me he cheated and wait for me to break up with him or something? Why would I want her after that? When that didn't work, she tried to seduce all of my friends. None of them took the bait, thankfully. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a while, but made sure to send me messages every day while they were together, letting me know she'd rather be with me instead. Lily made sure to stay in my life the entire time I was at university. There was a time when I tried to pull away from her, and she ended up starting these malicious rumors about me and damaging a career opportunity I'd put a lot of time into. I don't know all of what she did behind my back, but it made me realize it might be safer to just let her think she was a part of my life while ignoring her, rather than do something that would cause her to get angry. I knew at this point she really didn't have any reservations about hurting me to get what she wanted. After I graduated, Lily of course still wanted to hang around me, but now I didn't have that additional impetus of school keeping me there. I made excuses about work and barely talked to her after that point. I had entirely stopped posting on social media I knew she knew about. Of course, she would not give up that easily. Usually, I ignored all of her attempts though. I didn't think she was still tracking me online, but in hindsight, she probably was. I don't know how, but she'd reference things I mentioned online somewhere else she couldn't have known about. The last time we had a conversation for real, she sent me a message out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken at all in months, and we hadn't talked about anything serious in much longer than that. Thinking about that conversation still makes my skin crawl. At first, she asked me some questions about how long I'd known I was queer. I told her some basic stuff, the kind of things I'd tell anyone who asked. Then she changed the subject. She started talking about how I would feel about her if she was a boy, about wanting to be a boy for me. The messages quickly became fetishistic. Again, we were not even friends at this point. We'd never been especially close, and we'd barely spoken for years. I can't imagine sending messages like that even to a close friend, let alone someone who barely knew you. I tried telling her not to pull this crap with me, and then she decided to change tactics. She started role-playing as me. The worst part is that she seemed to believe it was real, that those things had actually happened to her, even when she was quoting me word for word. Things I'd told her only hours before were now part of her life. It was like she was trying to absorb me or something, to take over my history, to make my life a part of her. Yeah, I really didn't want to talk to her again after that. I ignored future attempts she made and eventually silently deleted her from the inactive social media, which was her only real way of contacting me. I really thought she might finally move on. But then I started getting more friend requests on everywhere. They're still sitting there unanswered because I know if I delete them, she'll somehow find a way to seek me out elsewhere. Lily and I met nearly 12 years ago. This story is just the highlights, and even then, it's only the stuff I knew about for sure. A lot happened behind my back. I just know it did. I was around 18 years old at the time, sitting in my bedroom, and no bullshit, watching The Purge for the first time. My bedroom window only had one latch out of the two locked because I would smoke out of it at night, being too afraid to go outside alone around 1 a.m. During the entire movie though, I kept hearing this light scratching. I thought it was probably just another cat under the house or something. After about 5 minutes though, I paused the movie, only to hear it again, this time much louder. I was getting kind of creeped out. I reached under my curtain and pushed the unlocked side of my window down, then locked it fully. Looking back in hindsight, the fact that one part of my window was fucking pried open should have alarmed me. I sat back down, only to hear a loud slam come from the bathroom. I ran out to go check. The blinds had fallen off the window. I ran straight to my parents' bedroom, and my dad immediately knew something was very wrong. He hopped up in all of his manly glory with his .45 and his tighty-whitey undies and ran out the back door to search the yard. He didn't see anyone, and we decided to call the cops in the morning. My nephew was staying overnight, and we figured there was really no point in freaking him out over what we felt was nothing. The next day, we decided to take a look around though. We found my window had scratch marks from a crowbar, and the ledge was dented, as if someone was really trying to pry my window open. Whoever it was had worn socks on their hands to try and push up the glass, because there weren't any handprints either. There were just these long and dragged out marks the size of adult hands going upward. Mind you, my windows were very dirty, so it was easy to see. We lived in a very small town in Louisiana, so the police chief who knew my parents came to the house after a formal report. For some reason, he kept insisting it must be either a friend or maybe a boyfriend who couldn't get in touch with me. One, everyone I know knew my dad was always well armed and would not play around with that shit. And two, my cell was always on, and I always answered, especially for friends, even at 1 in the morning. And for an additional third point, that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. Friends don't wear socks on their hands and try to jimmy your window open just to see you. At least not without calling out your name first. We never did find out who did this or what they wanted. What still scares me even 10 years later though, is that the house was not quiet. There was a TV and a lamp or two on in the living room, The bathroom light was on as well, and my bedroom was very well lit since I was watching a horror movie. Yet this person still tried to get in through 2 different windows. The worst part is that if our bathroom window was not so shitty and useless, they would have absolutely made it in. To keep it open, my mom would use an old broom handle to hold it up, and unless there was something keeping it up like that, it would immediately slam back down. This is likely why the blinds came off, and that loud slam I'd heard as well. It may just be me, but I'm pretty sure whoever it was wanted something in our house so badly that they didn't care who was inside or if they were awake. If I would have opened that curtain before locking my window, maybe it would have scared them off. Or maybe it would have motivated them even more to come in and get me instead. In September of 2018, I met this guy, Andrew, through a mutual friend on our birthday. Andrew had taken an interest in me immediately, but I was kinda clueless until several of my friends pointed it out. Andrew began texting me a lot, and we eventually started hanging out all on our own. A couple of weeks passed by, and eventually we started dating as well. That's when things started to get weird though. Whenever I would hang out with my friends, he'd get very aggressive about me not spending time with him instead. One weekend, I had seen him almost every day that week. On Friday morning, we had plans to hang out as well, but I was feeling sick that day, so I had to cancel. Later that night, I had a Halloween party, and I was feeling better from earlier, so I decided to go. Needless to say, he got very angry at me, saying I never wanted to spend time with him and all sorts of abusive language. Other weird things were happening as well, but in the end, I told him I wanted to end things via text. I was a bit scared to tell him in person, honestly. He didn't take it very well at all. He would constantly message me after, asking if we could meet up in person to talk, at the park no less. I just kept saying I thought it best that we did not. After I rebuffed him that way, he began to ask all of my friends for my class schedule. I was a junior in college at the time. Obviously, they didn't give it to him because they knew all of the weird things he'd been doing. I had to skip one of my classes the next day to make my schedule for the next semester. When I got home, my friend told me that Andrew had gone to that very same class. Nobody had given my schedule or told him anything. He had gone onto the website where we make schedules and looked up every single class related to the major I was taking, then went to the classroom where he found my name to basically force me into talking to him. I'd never been so grateful to have skipped a class before in my life. Even after that, he still kept trying to talk to me and kept popping up everywhere as well. Eventually, I did block him on everything, and after that, I finally stopped seeing him around. It really scared me though. I'm glad that eventually it just stopped all on its own.